Welcome to the Confluence cast presented by Columbus Underground. We are a weekly Columbus-centric podcast focusing on the civics, lifestyle, entertainment, and people of our city. I'm your host, Tim Fulton. This week, with spring upon us in the capital city, we are all about change. There's a vibrancy in the air, and that's apparent in our latest roundup of the biggest stories on Columbus Underground. Today, co-founder and editor Walker Evans sat down to discuss everything from Liz Lessner's influential legacy to the latest murmurs about when we'll get passenger rail. There are also plenty of renderings to peruse. You can get more information on what we discussed today in the show notes for this episode at theconfluencecast.com. Enjoy the interview. Sitting down here with Walker Evans, the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Columbus Underground. Walker, how are you, sir?
I am excellent. How are you, Tim?
Good. We are here to do another quarterly wrap-up, basically, of things that have been in the news, things folks may have missed.
Yeah.
You have furnished a list for us.
Yes.
I always appreciate it. First of all, how are things going? Comedy festival's coming along.
Yeah. We have a whole bunch of events this year. We're doing a 5K. We're hosting a 5K this summer.
Okay.
Yeah, we have our urban living tour coming up in a couple of weeks. The coffee festival is relocating and getting bigger. So lots of event stuff, lots of things in the news to write about. Mm-hmm. So it feels like I don't know, there's some like palpable energy. Maybe it's just because the weather finally turned nice. But
maybe.
There's people out walking around. Downtown feels like the heart is beating again after a cold winter. So
and I do think that like sort of the drumbeat we've been pushing of like, hey, things are going to have to change if we're going to be a viable city. Like we may, the Link Us bond issue. Mm-hmm. Sorry, it's not a bond issue. The Link Us issue. Mm-hmm. The new zoning changes that they're hoping to push through, the Associated Press around that. But the stories we're talking about today, first up, the title, the Liz Lessner restaurant era has officially come to an end.
Yeah, this was an article that like last fall I started to think about because Tip Top had just changed hands. The folks.
So let's step back.
Oh, sure.
For those that don't know.
Okay.
Who is Liz? What was it like in Columbus in 2008?
Well, kids gather around and listen to some old men tell you a tale. Elizabeth Lessner opened a restaurant called Betty's in the Short North in 2001.
Okay.
Very long time ago. In the spot where Brassica is now, just for context. And it was, the Short North is a very different neighborhood. A lot of weeknights, it got kind of dark and quiet and sleepy and a little weird to walk around by yourself at night. Mm-hmm. And Liz wanted to have a space that was women-focused, welcoming to that kind of late-night crowd, give people a place to have sort of a bit of a safe haven. Mm-hmm. And she was doing food in an era, because you have to think, like, this is before fast casual. This is before Chipotle.
Yeah.
So it was either like fast food or fine dining. There wasn't a whole lot of like middle ground unless you felt like going to like Don Pablo's or something. You know what I mean?
Right. There was an independent of that version.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So I think Liz wanted to carve out a niche to like where people could get some unique specials and drink specials. And this was before, every bar had a, 20 craft beers on tap. Mm-hmm. This is before we had 100 craft breweries in the region. So, it was kind of a hip, cool spot, and it was successful. And she opened up 8 restaurants in total, all different concepts. Dirty Frank's was the only one to have a second location. Mm-hmm. But one by one, they closed, relocated. Liz kind of said in the story, if you read the full story, that she wanted to really just do it for 20 years and kind of be done. Mm-hmm. She said retire by 40 was her goal, and I think she was done at like 41. So. Okay. But the final 2 sort of like hangers on were Tip Top downtown, which is still there and still going, but her brother Tim was kind of still running the show, and the 2 of them sold it to the folks that run the Arch City Tavern. Mm-hmm. So it has new ownership. And then the Torpedo Room at the Gateway Film Center, which was a concept she developed for the Gateway, just switched over to like a new speakeasy model, so it's not open to the general public anymore.
Okay.
It's a members only thing for Gateway Film Center members.
Okay.
So I'm like, these are the last two. This is kind of, she sold Dirty Frank's a long time ago. Dirty
Right.
Frank's is still going, but it's been under new ownership for probably 10 years now. So I reached out to Liz and said, hey, would you want to sit down and reminisce? Would you want to do a Zoom call? Because she lives in Texas now.
Yeah.
And she was like, I'm going to be in town for Thanksgiving. You want to just get together in person? So we sat down for 2 hours and just talked about every single place. And it took me a while to get the story done, but it was crazy well read. That's why it's number one on the list, because it was super well read. And the really nice thing too, Liz said that like I didn't tell her the day that it was publishing, like it just like went up that day. And then later that afternoon, she said she was on like a work Zoom call and she had her phone in the other room and she could hear it like buzzing on the table, like every 15 seconds, like bzz, bzz, bzz. And her first thought was like, oh my God, who died?
Right.
Like
something wrong. Something happened. Right.
Yeah. And then she went and looked and she just had all these people reaching out to her like, oh, hey, we haven't talked in a while, like old friends reconnecting. Yeah. People sharing like their favorite recipes. Like, I really love this one dish. And yeah.
So, well, and to Liz's credit, I was just at Pat and Gracie's the other day, and I actually hadn't eaten at the downtown one, and the server was like, hey, Tim, I remember you from Surly Girl. It's like those institutions had some staying power in terms of how people thought about them.
Yeah.
The one thing that, and I don't know if you talked about it, is the one thing that was interesting to me about her and her business model is each restaurant had a different business partner.
Yes.
This was not like we think of some restaurant groups in town who it's like,
one ownership,
one owner, and then like 5 concepts, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Cameron Mitchell is a gargantuan example of that.
And she credited him with a lot of like mentorship and things of that nature. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah,
I just always thought it was interesting that she did it that way, basically.
And I think some of that was just sort of the bootstrappy, like, trying to get friends and family together and rub a couple nickels together and open a restaurant. And I mean, they were like thrifting the chandeliers, that would go into places like Surly Girl. So it was very DIY aesthetic. So I think that was just kind of spawned out of that. Came about naturally.
Well, and much credit to her for sort of helping the burgeoning restaurant scene in Columbus, get its feet.
Sure. And I think even to this day, like you can feel the like ramification, maybe that's the wrong word, but like the snark and the like the cheeky attitude that were prevalent in all of her places. Yeah. I mean, that is there in spades in places like Mikey's and Oddfellows. And I mean, Old Town Tavern feels a lot like Tip Top,
Absolutely.
When you start to like look at some similarities. And so I think all those inspirations kind of live on in different ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a very good like feel good piece.
Yeah.
When I put it on social media, we're like, are people just going to be like, Columbus sucks because all of her restaurants closed, shake it. And people are like, oh no, I liked these places, and this was a fun kind of walk down memory lane.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's great.
Next up on the list, Columbus included in 2 new proposed long distance Amtrak routes.
Yeah, surprise, surprise. People love reading about trains. But this kind of came out of left field because there's been so much discussion for, over a decade now about the 3C corridor. So Cleveland, Dayton, Columbus, Cincinnati.
3C plus D.
3C plus D. And then the other corridor that we have, put in, the funding and the studies and all that sort of stuff because of the Hyperloop was Chicago to Columbus to Pittsburgh. These other sort of larger proposals, the long distance proposals, were part of a larger sort of network of planning, that the federal government is digging into. And some of those were like New Orleans kind of snaking all the way up and hitting Columbus and going up to like Toronto and, going across to New York. So it kind of like came out of left field to a degree, and people are like, oh, if we can build one route, great. If we can build like all 4 or 5 of these, all of a sudden Columbus is like a hub, and we've got a lot to be able to access. So yeah, people are really excited to read about that.
Is there sort of at least from Columbus, and I realize that this is a state issue, just a general plan, like once we don't have passenger rail at all.
Right.
And is there hey, there's going to be a new Union Station. Hey, which was the original train station we had, which is where the convention center is now. Is there a plan for we can't even figure out where to put a bus station.
Yeah,
apparently.
The plan right now that the city and like Morpsey and some of the other leaders in this have put together is in kind of a very similar spot. So by the convention center. So basically, you know where you pull in at the convention center where the new Hilton Hotel is, and there's kind of that little loop.
Yeah.
And there's like a hole there, and you can like look down into the hole and see the train tracks down below.
Yeah.
It would be capping over part of that, and that would be sort of the or the street level entrance. And so you would go downstairs to like a boarding platform because that's where the tracks are.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, okay.
Yeah. So that would be the downtown station. They're talking about the route from Chicago to Columbus to Pittsburgh, maybe having like an airport location.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So then might also be like an airport station.
So there wouldn't be. I'm glad I asked. Like there wouldn't be like one central Columbus station, but
the downtown would be like the main, the main one.
But maybe you take a tram or something to transfer to the airport.
But also Dublin is like, if this is passing through here, on the way to Chicago, like we want to stop in Dublin.
Of course they do.
Why wouldn't they?
I mean, they can. You can have it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But it also kind of is exciting because then it allows us to think about like, well, if these tracks and these stations are here, for long distance travel through Amtrak, could we also have like a shorter run commuter service that runs on those rails as well? That's just like a Dublin Columbus back and forth express sort of a thing. You do have to, I'm not like super well versed in this stuff, but you have to have the right like rolling stock to do that.
Right.
So it couldn't be like a light rail line because it's just different track widths and distances and all that sort of stuff. So it'd have to be something more like the Music City Star in Nashville, which is like it's a refurbished heavy rolling stock train.
Okay.
But it's a suburban commuter train.
Got it.
Yeah. But it's not technically light rail or like a tram.
Right. Well, and that's part of the infrastructure issue too, right? Like because we don't currently have commuter rail, there is going to need to be some rail improvements.
Yeah.
The stuff that, coal rides on is not the stuff that people ride on. It can be, but it has to be multimodal.
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. Well, and some of it too is about smoothing out some of the curves.
Okay.
So like, coal probably never goes more than like 50 miles an hour on a lot of these tracks. And if we want high speed rail to go 100
or higher speed
rail,
right.
Then there are places where like this can't be a 20-degree turn over a quarter mile. It needs to be a 15-degree turn.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's those improvements too.
Up next on our list, a lot of transit, by the way. 2-mile bike and pedestrian loop planned for downtown.
Yes, the Capitol line.
So the context here that I don't think we have talked about, at least on the podcast, is the redoing of Gay Street.
Right.
Right. So first of all, talk about the bike and pedestrian loop and how that factors into what they're planning for Gay Street.
Yeah, so the whole loop, it sounds something a little similar to the Cultural Trail in Indianapolis, but I think they're taking a lot more design cues from European cities.
Okay.
So really, it would be about defining certain streets to be a lot more pedestrian and bike-centric, even just, in terms of like paint on the ground, like solid, lines and areas like this is for bikes versus having just sharrows in a car lane, and defining a loop and connecting all of these different amenities that we have downtown. And Amy Taylor, formerly of CDDC,
which is no longer CDDC.
Now it's CDI, so or DCI. I'm sorry, Downtown Columbus Inc. Amy has talked a lot recently about how they realize that they've done a great job of building assets from Columbus Commons to the Scioto Mile to the Peninsula, but not the best job in connecting these assets. And so this is something that is supposed to help drive people from point A to point B, all along this trail. Phase one, and also to spur development, the same way that Columbus Commons was like, we're going to build the 6-acre park and hope, private development fills in around it. And that happened.
It sure did.
Yeah. So this is another sort of shot in the arm. And so there's a lot of hemming and hawing, like, oh, it's $100 million sort of investment. And it's like, but it will pay dividends. It will drive billions in new private sector development all around this trail. Phase one would be kind of updating Gay Street.
Okay.
Narrowing the street vehicular wise, widening sidewalks and allowing for a lot more flexible use of the public space so that things like the Moonlight Market or the Pearl Market could have access to spill out into the street more easily, or special events. You could close down. We've got the sculpture right out here, closing the street down to have like a concert under it or a holiday event, that sort of stuff.
I mean, the renderings look great, right?
They do. Shout out to Realm Collaborative. They did kind of the initial groundwork. They don't have the contract to do like all of the actual work going forward. I think they're submitting for that.
Okay.
So just want to make that point of clarification. But the work that they've done on kind of the visioning process, A++.
Have they
beautiful renderings?
Talked much about where that $100 million comes from? I assume DCI is putting up some of their money.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to be a combination of like city, DCI, probably some private investment, the same way that they've, like I think AEP donated X million dollars to the riverfront. So a variety of sources. But when you look at the list of leadership that has co-signed onto this project, it's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
God bless the partnership. Up next, Heath Town Center building is expected to open in 2026.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, Heath is a little town just south of Newark.
Not just a candy bar.
Not just a candy bar. Well, and when you sent me the list, I was like, oh, we're going to have a health town center. Because I was reading too quickly. Because honestly, you don't hear about Heath much.
Not at all.
So what's happening in Heath?
Well, a lot of suburban and exurban communities, I think, have seen the success, not just of places like Bridge Park, but downtown Hilliard, kind of the old Hilliard area, Creekside and Gahanna. They're all kind of reinvesting into their downtown areas. They realize that there's value in creating kind of a walkable, mixed-use sort of environment. It's going to help them retain millennials who, if you grow up in Heath, usually you just want to get out of Heath.
Right.
So giving people a variety of options for housing and lifestyle is kind of, I think, the MO for a lot of these places. So we've been trying to write about them, and shout out to Chris Alexis, who's been tackling a lot of these because there's so many happening that Brent can't do all of them anymore.
Right.
So Chris has been really stepping in to help out with some of these sort of exurban community projects. The Heath one, they're taking like a big chunk of fields kind of next to the Indian Mountain Mall.
Okay.
So it's kind of a step one. If you look at it, you can kind of see like this is great, but it's very much an island.
Right.
It's sort of like, you can walk around within this town center, but as soon as you like leave the property, it kind of just turns into suburb very quickly.
Yeah. Or just field, right? Like,
Field to one side. I think it's next to their like little regional airport on the south end of it, but to the east, it's the mall, and it's a lot of like, it'd be like trying to ride your bike on Polaris Parkway.
Yeah.
It very quickly turns into that around there.
Yeah.
So, but I think that could be a phase two. Redeveloping that mall, I'm sure eventually will be something that needs to be done. I've not been in it in a very long time. So
yeah. Well, and it does make me think of how Easton came up, right? Like there was Easton 1 and there was Easton 2. And it's very similar to what we're seeing in Dublin.
Yeah.
Right. And there are I was working on a project where I ended up in a couple of small, literally rural towns in Ohio, and these XX urban areas are doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And when you talk to city leaders, they're very specific. This is all about retention.
Yeah.
It's all about making sure that their tax base doesn't die.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
That they have kids, they have schools, that they have vibrancy.
And I imagine to some degree too, when you think about the leadership and the planning and the city councils in these places, it's kind of the next generation is coming in. These aren't the people that, were maybe making the decisions 20, 30 years ago. So I think it's a fresh set of eyes on things to some degree. Hopefully the Indian Mountain Mall, if it's redeveloped, maybe they can change the name. So it's not the shopping on your ancestor's grave commerce center.
Yeah.
It's a little on the nose,
A
in my
little bit.
opinion, but that's probably a heated city council meeting
some
in the
things,
future.
Sometimes you have to change the name of things.
Yes. Yeah.
You know. What was the other thing I was going to say regarding that? Oh, just like I think about maybe, 10 years ago, that Tulsa introduced a whole bunch of like really small programs for folks who were able to work remotely. And they and other things, other like tax incentives for building and investment, while still trying to retain, the historic aspects of that town, that city. And it worked, right? It totally worked. And it didn't work with, yes, it certainly had private investment coming in, but it wasn't an Intel plant that did it.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have to find an interesting mix with our partner communities like Heath, which, again, I hadn't thought about Heath in a while.
Well, and I think another great example too is Newark, right next to Heath. Like they've invested a lot into their downtown area, both from an infrastructure standpoint and just trying to lure new small businesses and creating more farmers markets and events and things like that.
Yeah,
and it's nice.
Yeah. And it's just literally making people want to live there.
Yeah,
because that's how you get how you get income taxes.
Exactly.
Up next on the list, 3 new vendors open at Bubblegum Hall amid turnover, lawsuit.
Yeah,
that's headline writing.
Props to Susan.
Yes,
I think that probably was super well read because of the word lawsuit in there. Because Bubblegum Hall is not really all that new, but it sounds like they've had some turmoil in terms of some bills going unpaid, and it sounds like that's still ongoing.
The word receivership, I do not know if they're actually in it, but the word has been thrown around.
Yeah, I want to be careful how I word things because
certainly.
I don't know all of the details of it, but it sounds like there's been a lot of struggle, and some of the businesses there have kind of hinted at problems, but they don't want to speak on the record because if they're still kind of tied to lease negotiations, it sounds like it's been a pretty big challenge. And I know that food halls have been kind of like the hot thing for the past couple of years.
Right.
You look at, the more urban, I mean, to some degree, the North Market is a food hall.
It is.
You look at Bud Dairy, and that's a food hall. I think suburban communities are trying to replicate this model, and I don't know if it quite works. Maybe in a place like New Albany, where people, want a more specific kind of experience. They don't want like that communal dining and a loud, kind of casual environment, maybe. So I think this really just speaks to you can't just pick up, a square object and drop it into a round hole 20 miles out and expect the exact same result.
Well, and the model is hard, right?
Sure.
Like there's so many moving parts. I still think that Bud Dairy is sort of not at the place where it's going to be. I think it's sustainable because of the liquor revenue.
Sure.
But it's a really diverse array of foods that I don't want to be eating when I'm drinking, right? Like not necessarily.
Sure,
is what I'm saying.
Sure, yeah.
And so they will, but I have a lot of faith that they will continue to evolve and find the right mix.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that Bud Dairy has that I don't think Bubblegum Hall does, Bud Dairy has 2,000 people that live within a short walk.
Right.
And currently being built another 2,000 to 3,000 people coming into all the apartment communities.
Yeah.
Within, I'm talking like a 2-minute walk,
right,
like within 2 blocks. And so I think, a young audience, a young urban audience wants that kind of like, oh, let's just pop over there for lunch.
Exactly.
Or happy hour kind of a thing.
Well, but I was about to say, you will not survive on lunch alone.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a hard model, and hopefully they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Up next on the list, unique properties for sale, the Cleveland and Second Building.
Yeah, so this was a series I started at the beginning of the year, unique properties. I love looking on like LoopNet and some of the different, websites that list commercial properties for sale. So not just like going to Zillow and looking at houses.
Right.
There's always things that you didn't realize were for sale because it's more of like a behind the scenes sort of a thing.
Yeah.
So wanted to call attention to a couple. That was the second one that we wrote about. The first one is the building at Grant and Cleveland. Famously has the door up on the 3rd floor and it says watch your step or watch the first step or whatever.
Yes.
Close to Columbus State. That was for sale. And both articles have been well read, which a little surprising, but I guess not. So this is a series we're going to continue throughout the year. Blake Compton of Compton Construction is sponsoring the series now.
Oh, great.
So, I think they probably want to be the people to redevelop these buildings if people buy them and want a construction company. So
no, it's a synergy.
Shout out
wrong with that.
Shout out to Compton. But yeah, there's just a lot of really interesting things. And that building, if you've not seen it, it looks like, do you know which building I'm talking about?
I don't think so.
It's on the corner, Cleveland and Second.
Okay.
There's been like some...
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
this is the building
close
that
to 934.
for a long time had a quote on it about...
An incorrect quote.
Okay. Had a quote on it about the economic segregation that Columbus experiences.
Yes.
What was the quote and why is it wrong?
It says Columbus is the second most economically segregated city in the U.S.
And why is that incorrect?
Because the Columbus metropolitan area is the second most economically segregated region in the U.S., according to that study from 2015. Correct. Yeah. And I feel like it's divisive to say city because that's sort of like a neighborhood versus neighborhood thing.
True.
And the real economic segregation is more of a suburb versus city thing.
Fair. Okay.
I think we have
I'm going to leave that there.
I'm
just going to leave it there.
But that building is for sale. I think it's still for sale. And it looks like a nightmare on the inside. I don't think anyone's been in it in 30 years.
No. Well, and I used to live right there at the Milo Arts Center.
Yeah.
Like that. There's a lot of interesting real estate stock there.
But it's such a prominent location, and that's what we're trying to focus on.
Sorry, it will be a prominent location. It's not now.
Yeah.
Like it's a
I just mean a lot of people go by it.
True.
Like it's high visibility, I guess I should say.
That's fair.
And so, the right person with the right vision could do something pretty cool. It's a cool old building. I don't want to see it torn down.
What are they asking for it?
$325,000.
1,000?
Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah.
Let's buy it.
It's that's $76 a square foot. That's pretty cheap.
That's pretty cheap.
Yeah.
But it's probably going to need a new building.
it needs a shit ton of work.
There you go.
Yeah, it's in bad shape.
Next up on our list, new airport terminal renderings, timeline released.
Yeah, so the complete renovation of the airport has been kind of on the docket for a while, but there was a new batch of visuals released this quarter, and people love a good visual.
Yeah.
Very white, very clean.
Oh, I was like, what? It's the
airport. Yes, the design.
The airport is racially disparate, but that is not what you're saying.
No. Yeah.
Sorry.
Very kind of like futuristic looking.
Okay.
Or contemporary design, I guess I should say.
Okay.
Yeah. To which, some people think it looks great. Some people are like, why do we need to spend this much money on our airport? Like, we're not a major, hub.
Because that's how you become a hub.
Well, and it doesn't. I think it redesigns like the capacity. Like the footprint isn't really a whole lot bigger, but it will allow for more flights to get in and out faster. So it's better from that perspective. I think some people are disappointed that it's not an expansion. This would be a new terminal built, and then the old terminal would be demolished,
which is very common. In the airport world, it's always been notable to me. I traveled some that every other airport always has major renovation going on. LaGuardia, Denver, even though it was just rebuilt, like they're rebuilding whole terminals every couple of years, and that, at least in my memory, has not happened.
Yeah.
And for anybody that travels much in Port Columbus, if you're not in Terminal B, you're not anywhere. And if you fly in after 8:30 at night, there may not be a gate crew for you.
Right.
Like it could stand for some updating.
Yeah, and I think the redesign, if I remember correctly, had a lot more communal shared areas across like those kinds of gates. Whereas now it's like if you're in this gate, you have this set of like food and drink options, and if you're in that gate, you get a different set of food and drink options. And I think it's a little more shared.
Good.
Yeah, which would be good for the businesses out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Next up on the list, Metro Center Metamorphosis, Dublin's answer to changing market trends.
Yeah, so this kind of ties into what we're talking about with Heath. The city of Dublin has the old Metro Center kind of office park, which I think was built in like the late 60s, early 70s. It's wildly out of date. They want to do something with it, so the city is sort of embarking on this community input master plan sort of a thing. They don't want to make another Bridge Park. that would just be the easy thing to do. So really trying to hit the reset switch and figure out like what amount of workspace this should be, what amount of living space it should be, what amount of green, public community space it should be. But really trying to take, because it's a very large area, it's acres and acres of land.
Okay.
But it's not really doing the city any good in its current iteration. So yeah, really kind of trying to take the lead on the conversation.
But in the beginning stages, like they are still, this is still in the community conversation. Let's do some benchmarking. Yeah.
I think January was their first like big public, like community workshop event, like come point at pictures and say what you like and what you don't, and put, Post-it notes on a board kind of a stuff. So I think it'll be an ongoing process throughout the year, but, really interesting in terms of what our readers are looking at, because it will be something urban and walkable. It won't just be another office park that's mostly surface parking.
Good.
Which is what it is now.
To Dublin's credit, I rolled my eyes a little bit because Dublin, but that's probably an old way of thinking in terms of like who lives there, what is it. It's also got one of the last freestanding malls, right? That's viable.
Tuttle?
Yeah.
I forget.
Viable. I should use air quotes, but
yeah, I think Tuttle has like a Dublin address, but it's in the city of Columbus. It's like a weird.
I just think of it in terms of like the area that it's in. And,
yeah.
Next up on the list, Symphony outlines plans for $275 million concert hall. They just dropped it on us.
Yeah. I think they weren't ready.
Were you surprised?
Some
because you have your ear to the ground, obviously, and like
yeah.
people send you embargoed things or say
like,
"Hey, off the record," or "Hey, don't write about this yet." But it was a news story, and it was like, oh, the news story had the renderings already in it.
Yeah, the some of the information had leaked. Like someone involved in the project had posted something on like Reddit.
Okay,
and then that kind of triggered, I think, the media attention. We reached out as soon as we saw it, and I'm sure the Dispatch and Business First did the same thing.
Okay,
and so I think it kind of left the partners involved in this kind of scrambling to issue a response. Because I don't think they had all the ducks in a row. I don't think they had all the talking points in a row.
Right.
So I think it was not as, it wasn't where they were wanting it to be in terms of like having the mayor
or
saying
a big
this
unveil,
point and GCAC saying this, and it was a little like we're still having internal conversations about this sort of a thing.
So and this is, sorry, I like getting into the process part. Like, is everybody on board?
As far as I'm aware, yeah. There's always, nuts and bolts to kind of work out.
Kappa sent out a supportive message. Kappa is not worried about losing that basically rental. Is it really going to happen though?
It's one of those things that like if the right partners all say we're doing this, then it happens.
Yeah.
I haven't heard all of that, but I haven't been as plugged in, to that as I have some other things. So I think it looks good. I've also heard that the visuals for it, the design was not the final product. It's still kind of a work in progress.
Yeah.
I think the location
looks very pie-in. A symphony complex is a huge endeavor.
Yeah.
$275 million is a lot of money.
Yeah.
And the renderings, we keep going back to renderings. I think we're coming up with the title of this episode now.
Yeah.
It looked very sort of like pie in the sky. Like, here's what something like this could really look like, and wasn't necessarily aligned with the location, what the symphony needs, anything like that. But I don't know. It just looked pretty.
Yeah. Well, and the location, kind of completes this trifecta that's long been planned for like our arts and civic infrastructure along the west side of the riverfront downtown. So we have the Vets Museum, the old Vets Memorial was torn down and the Vets Museum was built, and then COSI, and then this other like chunk of land, I can't remember how many acres it is. Originally, there was a zoo expansion plan there. Do you remember that?
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it came up at a time where there was a little bit of like a kerfuffle about like funding, and the zoo wanted to issue a new levy, and I think there was a lot of opposition about like this levy goes on to Franklin County. The zoo is technically in Delaware County.
Right.
Like we need more of a regional funding mechanism for the zoo so that the whole region's paying for it. Like you're basically just asking for Columbus to pay for the zoo, even though it's
Right. Which is kind of what happens anyway. But yeah, if you have a Franklin County address, you get a discount to the zoo.
Yeah. So I'm forgetting off the top of my head right now if it actually went to the ballot and was voted down, or if they pulled it saying that like we don't feel like we have the support for this right now.
I absolutely don't know, but my theory is that somebody like a lot of things and how they happen in Columbus, somebody was like, "Hey, can I talk to you for a second?" Like, you can't do this. Like, we've got this school levy. Like, you got to work with the whole system. The school levy's coming, the transit levy's coming, something else, a bond issue for the city.
I think this might have actually went to vote.
I don't remember.
Yeah, this was like a decade ago. But anyway, that was going to be the third piece of that trifecta, and then that went away, and then it's just been an empty spot ever since. So I think this still kind of fits that original vision of like having these like civic institutions, boom, 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 three in a row. And would be complementary to, the peninsula area, which is kind of evolving into a little bit of a entertainment district, and complementary to Franklinton as an arts and entertainment district. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm all for it.
The more things change.
Yeah. And honestly, $275 million, like we could do a bond. We could issue a bond to pay for it.
It's not a crazy amount of money.
Yeah.
We're building a bike trail for 100.
Yeah.
Last up on the list today, photos, new Metro Park Canopy Walk to open this spring.
Yeah.
Where's that?
It is in the Black Lick Woods Metro Park.
Okay.
Brent went up there and got some photos of the Canopy Walk under construction back in February. It just looks really cool.
Okay.
They're building both stairs and elevator to get up into the Canopy Walk.
Okay.
And then, I don't know how many feet it is, 30, 40 feet off the ground. So you're going to walk around and get some cool views. And
very cool.
There have been some places like this. We went to one in an arboretum up like outside of Cleveland with the kids, and there's a big, kind of 12-story like tree. You can see all the way to like Lake Erie, 10 miles away. Yeah. So this won't be quite as extreme as that, but just something, new, another draw to the Metro Park system. And I think people really just love seeing the photos of this sort of thing under construction. So,
yeah. And a nice little, what are you going to do this afternoon with your mother-in-law that's in town, or frankly, filling time with your kids?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. One more fun thing this summer to go check out.
It's great to have.
Yeah.
Cool. Walker, thanks for your time.
Yeah. No problem, Tim.
Thank you for listening to the Confluence Cast presented by Columbus Underground. Again, you can get more information on what we discussed today in the show notes for this episode at theconfluencecast.com. Please rate, subscribe, share this episode of the Confluence Cast with your friends, family, contacts, enemies, your favorite rail enthusiast. If you're interested in sponsoring the Confluence Cast, get in touch with us. We can be reached by email at info@theconfluencecast.com. Our theme music was composed by Benji Robinson. Our producer is Philip Cogley. I'm your host, Tim Fulton. Have a great week.